Only in America, Patricia Naggiar.
Fellow Toastmasters and guests, I was sitting on the floor in one of the most beautiful apartments in New York City. I was sitting on the floor, crying and bleeding. I was educated in a little convent in England, in Yorkshire, and the nuns wore beautiful headdresses, white, and a white wimple. So of course it was noticed when I put ink in the holy water. I went to the London Guildhall when I was 17, and I didn't really learn much there. I did learn how to fall backwards without hurting myself. At 18, the war was still on, so I was called up. You had to join one of the armed forces, or you had to work in a factory, or you could work as a landmine girl. And the farms were full of really handsome Italian prisoners of war. Anyway, John Gielgud, the actor, came to the Guildhall and said, I need 4 young women to come in a play for the troops to the Middle East. I was the first with my hand up. I went to every country in the Middle East that is now reigned over by ISIS. But in those days, it was reigned over by the British Empire. I met my husband, who was half Lebanese, half Italian, and his father said, you know, nationalism is growing in Egypt. I'm going to give you capital, go to Italy and start an industry. I was 21, he was 23, we knew nothing. So we went to Milano and we bought 7 little red Fiat vans with Raimondo Biscottificio written on them, and we started to grind out these cookies. They were so horrible that nobody bought them. So, being English, I said, why don't we change the name and call them dog biscuits? Dogs didn't like them either. So one day we get a telegram saying, come back to Egypt. It is cheaper for me if you never work again. So for the next 8 years, I lived in glorious splendor with 7 servants and 4 cars, 2 chauffeurs. And in the morning, I was gently awakened by Amina, who covered my body with Johnson's baby oil and a touch of arpege. And then I was floated into a foam bath and then put on the terrace for breakfast. It was not difficult to get used to. In 1956, Abdel Nasser took over the Suez Canal and he threw out the British, the French, and the Jews. The others came later. We were not allowed anything more than 1 suitcase each, nothing for the baby, and $1,000 each. And we arrived in New York City terrified. So we found a little crummy apartment in Jackson Heights, which is just a suburb of New York. And I organized the whole building. I said to all the young mothers, you bring your babies to me on Saturdays, and I will give you my baby the rest of the week. So I did house cleaning first, and then I joined a very elegant English nanny service. And through them, I was hired by the Hearst family to look after 4 children and 2 maids while they were in Bermuda on holiday. And the father said, I don't care what the children do, but don't let anybody touch that model ship on the mantelpiece, because it took me 2 years to make it. The next day, the 7-year-old took a poker and knocked it off. It fell in 1,000 pieces. The main mast was broken, all the rigging was down. Everybody was terrified. I gave my baby to the 12-year-old girl, and I told the 2 maids, if anybody causes any trouble in this next 10 days, I will kill them, because I'm going to make that model. I'm going to put it back together again. Luckily for them, I liked sniffing glue when I was young. And so I used to help my brother do his model ships and his model cars. So every night until 2 o'clock in the morning, I was working, carving, and one night I was sitting on the floor making a little ladder out of matchsticks, and I sliced through my whole finger, and I just burst into tears, and I just thought to myself, here I am, sitting here, crying and bleeding. I didn't come to America for this. I'm going to get out there and win. The next day, the parents came back, and the father looked at the mantelpiece and smiled. I took my money and ran. Found my best Christian Dior suit in the suitcase. I went to Time magazine, and I walked in, and I said, I'm a Middle East expert. I've just come from there. So they gave me a paper to fill out. The first question was, how many books have you written? I put 3. How many degrees do you have? 2. How many languages do you speak? 5. If you're going to lie, do it big, and then they will believe you. They didn't find out that I knew nothing. I used to go to another floor and say, because I knew nothing every day, would you mind helping me with this? They'll be so delighted upstairs, and I'll wait if you like. That was before Women's Lib, which ruined everything, of course. Then after Time magazine, I went to CBS, and I said, just come from Time magazine. And they were in full admiration of print journalism. So my life began at that moment, 34 years, and only in America.